Sarah Bennett's hands trembled as she sprinkled mozzarella over a lopsided pizza dough, the kitchen's dim light casting shadows on her tired face. The Toledo apartment smelled of yeast and tomato sauce, a Friday night ritual that felt like a lifeline. Emily, her 6-year-old daughter, knelt on a stool, her small fingers smearing sauce in uneven swirls. Her giggles bounced off the chipped linoleum, a sound that made Sarah's heart ache with love and dread. Tomorrow was the custody hearing, and the thought of David Carter's smug face in court twisted her stomach like a wrung-out rag. "Mommy, it's a heart," Emily chirped, pointing at her messy sauce design. Her brown eyes sparkled, oblivious to the storm brewing in Sarah's mind. Flour dusted her pigtails, and her oversized t-shirt, Sarah's old band tee, hung like a dress. Sarah forced a smile, brushing a strand of dark hair from her eyes. "Best Pizza Hut I've ever seen, kiddo." She slid the pizza into the oven, the heat washing over her face. The hum of the box fan in the corner fought the Ohio summer, but sweat still clung to her skin. She glanced at the stack of bills on the counter. Freelance graphic design gigs barely covered rent, let alone the lawyer's fees Lydia warned might come. David, with his corporate lawyer salary and gated McMansion, didn't have to count pennies. She had never thought that the person she fell in love with so passionately would become the person she would want to escape so badly. It felt like not long ago. Just a few years earlier, she stood in the kitchen of their Chicago apartment, the summer humming through the open window with the drone of city traffic. Her hands, still soft from her small-town days, scrubbed a pan caked with last night's lasagna, the steam rising like a ghost of her old dreams. At 24, she was a mother now, her body heavy with the changes of pregnancy and birth, her heart tethered to Emily, who slept in a crib down the hall. The apartment gleamed, floors mopped, counters wiped, David's shirts ironed and hung in precise rows. Sarah had made it a home, but it felt like a stage, her role played for an audience who rarely showed. David was late again. The clock ticked past 8, the dinner she'd cooked, roast chicken, his favourite, cooling under foil. Emily, 3 months old, had finally drifted off after hours of fussing, her tiny cries echoing Sarah's own exhaustion. Life had been bliss once, a whirlwind of passion when she'd met David in Wauseon, his lawyer's charm sweeping her from diner counters to Chicago's skyline. But now, with her pregnant belly gone and Emily's arrival, that bliss was fraying, replaced by a quiet ache she couldn't name. She remembered the early months of pregnancy, when David's hands had traced her curves with hunger, his kisses urgent under the city's neon glow. But as her belly swelled, stretching her skin into new maps, he'd pulled away. Nights out with clients stretched longer, his briefcase a constant companion, while Sarah waddled through grocery aisles alone. After Emily's birth, the distance grew colder. He barely touched the baby, his hands hesitant, as if her smallness was an inconvenience. Sarah had chalked it up to new dad nerves, but the truth cut deeper, revealed in a fight she couldn't forget. It was a month ago, Emily asleep, the apartment dark except for a single lamp. Sarah had stood in their bedroom, her postpartum body soft under a loose t-shirt, and faced David as he loosened his tie. "Why are you so cold?" she'd asked, her voice trembling, the words spilling after weeks of silence. "You don't touch me anymore. You barely look at Emily. What's wrong?" David had sighed, his eyes flicking away. "It's not you, Sarah," he said, his tone clipped like he was briefing a client. "It's just, your body's different now. After the birth, it's not pristine anymore. It feels weird." He'd shrugged, as if it were obvious, as if her sacrifice, hours of labour, a body reshaped for their daughter, was a flaw. Sarah had stood frozen, his words a slap. For the first time she saw him clearly, not the charming lawyer who'd won her heart, but a man who valued perfection over love. She'd wanted to scream, to shake him, but instead she'd nodded, swallowing the hurt. "Okay," she'd whispered, turning away, convincing herself she was overreacting. He was stressed, she told herself. He'd come around. but the crack had formed, and it widened every day. When the front door clicked open, David stepped in, his suit rumpled, the faint scent of whiskey clinging to him. "Hey," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. He didn't look at her, heading straight for the fridge to grab a beer. "Dinner's ready," Sarah said, her voice soft, forcing a smile. "Chicken, the way you like it." "Had a late meeting," he said, popping the cap. "Already ate with the team. I'll heat it up tomorrow." He sank onto the couch, flipping on the TV, the flicker of a baseball game filling the silence. Sarah's hands tightened on the dish towel. She'd spent hours cooking, balancing Emily's feedings and diaper changes, while David laughed with colleagues at some downtown bar. "Em's been fussy," she said, trying to bridge the gap. "She smiled today, though. You should see her." "Great," David said, his eyes on the screen. "I'll check on her later." But he didn't move, his focus locked on a home run, as if Emily, his daughter, was a footnote. Sarah turned back to the sink, her reflection faint in the window. She was exhausted, drained from the endless cycle of cleaning, cooking, washing and ironing David's clothes, managing bills and savings, and caring for Emily alone. She handled 95% of the parenting, nights rocking a crying baby, days soothing fevers, while David spent weekends golfing with friends or jetting off to Vegas for work trips. His corporate lawyer salary dwarfed her part-time design gigs, but her time was consumed, every hour accounted for. David believed his income earned him the right to come home, kick off his shoes, and leave the parenting to her, his weekends reserved for hobbies, golf, poker, anything but them. Emily's cry pierced the silence, sharp and needy. Sarah dropped the towel, hurrying to the nursery. She lifted her daughter, her warmth a balm, and rocked her gently, humming a lullaby. Emily's eyes, so like her own, fluttered shut, her tiny hand curling around Sarah's finger. "I've got you," Sarah whispered, kissing her forehead. The love was fierce, a fire that kept her going, but it couldn't burn away the loneliness. Back in the living room, David was still on the couch, the game's roar drowning out Emily's earlier cries. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching him sip his beer, his world untouched by theirs. "David," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "can you help with her tomorrow?" "Just for an hour. I need a break." He glanced up, irritation flashing. "I've got a tea time with clients," he said. "You've got this, Sarah. You're great with her." He turned back to the TV, dismissing her. It started when David grew secretive with his phone, angling it away, locking it with a new passcode. He'd always been glued to it. Corporate law demanded constant emails, but this was different, a guardedness that pricked her instincts. She'd ignored it at first, blaming her own fatigue, the endless cycle of cooking, cleaning and caring for 2-year-old Emily, while David golfed or vanished for client dinners. But one night, when he'd left his phone on the counter, the passcode unchanged despite his caution, curiosity won. Sarah swiped through, her heart sinking as she found texts from a co-worker named Lauren, flirtatious quips, heart emojis, and explicit photos that burned her eyes. "Miss you tonight," Lauren had written. "When's our next lunch?" David's replies were coy, suggestive, a knife in Sarah's chest. Now, as the front door clicked open, Sarah faced him, the phone heavy in her hand. David stepped in, his suit rumpled, a faint whiff of cologne not his usual. "You're up late," he said, loosening his tie, his eyes flicking to the phone. "What's that about?" Sarah's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "Who's Lauren?" She held up the screen, the texts glaring. "These don't look like work chats, David." His face tightened, a flash of panic before he forced a laugh. "It's nothing, Sarah. Just friendly banter. You're blowing this out of proportion." He reached for the phone, but she stepped back, her eyes locked on his. "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice rising. "These aren't jokes. Photos, David. Secret lunches. How long?" Her hands shook, the betrayal a physical ache. Emily's crib creaked down the hall, and Sarah lowered her voice, not wanting to wake her daughter. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine," he said, His tone clipped, like he was conceding a case. It's been 6 months. It's purely physical, Sarah. It doesn't mean anything. I still love you. He stepped closer, his eyes softening, but the words felt hollow, a lawyer's closing argument. Sarah's breath caught, tears burning. You love me? She whispered, her voice breaking. You've been sleeping with her for half a year, and you love me? What about Emily? Do you love her when you're sneaking around? I messed up, David said, his hands raised. Let's fix this. For Emily. We'll go to counselling, work it out. His voice was earnest, but his eyes darted, calculating, already rewriting the story. Sarah wanted to believe him for Emily's sake. She pictured her daughter's confusion, a life split between homes. So she agreed, her heart raw but clinging to hope. Then, a month later, she checked his phone again, driven by a gut she couldn't ignore. The texts to Lauren were still there, newer, bolder, sent during their counselling sessions. Can't wait to see you, he'd written, the date stamped after he'd sworn fidelity. The lie was a final blow, shattering any chance of reconciliation. I'm done, David. I'm filing for divorce. The words felt like a release, a door swinging open after years of being locked. David's face changed, the contrition vanishing. His eyes narrowed, a mix of guilt and venom flashing. You're breaking up our family, he hissed, stepping closer. You think you can just walk away? You'll regret this, Sarah. His voice was low, a threat wrapped in silk, and for the first time she saw the vindictiveness beneath his charm, fueled by his own shame and her refusal to bend. She stood meeting his gaze. The only thing I regret is trusting you, she said, her hands steady now. Emily deserves better. So do I. She turned, heading to check on their daughter, her resolve a shield against his glare. The divorce proceedings began, and David's true colours bled through. He didn't just fight for custody, he waged war. He spread lies among their circle, whispering to mutual friends that Sarah had cheated first, that she'd neglected Emily, leaving her hungry while chasing freelance gigs. At a friend's barbecue, Sarah overheard a former colleague murmur, "Heard she was unfaithful," the words a punch to her gut. Her phone, once buzzing with group chats, fell silent, invitations drying up as David's rumours took root. Even her parents in Warsion got calls from David's mother, hinting Sarah was an unfit mother, too unstable for Emily. The isolation was a slow poison, each whisper eroding her confidence, her social world shrinking to just Emily's laughter and her own stubborn heart. During one of the first hearings, Sarah was completely caught off guard with what David arrived at the family court. Grayson, David's lawyer, stood, his suit impeccable, his tone dripping with rehearsed sympathy. Your Honour, this case isn't just about custody. It's about a man's struggle against manipulation and neglect. He gestured to David, who bowed his head, the picture of a victim. Mr. Carter has endured years of emotional abuse from Ms. Bennett. She's controlling, dismissive of his needs, and, frankly, neglectful in their marriage. From the moment she learned of Mr. Carter's financial success, she clung to him, leveraging his wealth to secure her own comfort. Now she seeks to destroy him and claim his assets, using their daughter as a pawn. Sarah's breath caught, her face burning as if slapped. The accusations were raising Emily alone into a caricature of greed. She glanced at Lydia Harper, her public defender, whose tired eyes widened, her pen pausing over her notes. Lydia had warned her David might play dirty, but this was a new low, a narrative spun from lies she couldn't easily disprove. Sarah's heart sank. How do you prove you loved someone, that you gave everything, when the other side paints you as a monster? Grayson continued, his voice smooth, almost mournful. Ms. Bennett refused intimacy, shutting Mr. Carter out emotionally and physically, leaving him isolated in his own home. She neglected his needs, focusing only on her own agenda, securing his money. We have testimony from friends who witnessed her coldness, her demands for luxury she couldn't afford on her own. He slid a stack of affidavits to the judge, each one a betrayal from their Chicago circle, friends Sarah thought she'd known. Mr. Carter only wants to protect Emily from this toxic environment, to give her the stable, loving home Ms. Bennet can't provide. David dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief, his performance Oscar-worthy. "It's true, Your Honor," he said, his voice breaking just enough to seem genuine. "I tried to make it work. I loved her. But Sarah, she controlled everything. She pushed me away, made me feel like nothing. All I want is for Emily to be safe." He looked at Emily, who was adding green spots to her turtle, oblivious, and Sarah's stomach churned at his crocodile tears. Lydia leaned close, whispering, "We'll counter this. Stay calm." But her voice trembled, her caseload strain evident. Sarah nodded, her throat tight, her eyes stinging. She felt utterly helpless, a mouse in a maze with no exit. The affidavits, likely coerced or bought, were paper walls she couldn't tear down. Her own truth, the quiet moments of singing Emily to sleep, cooking David's favorite meals, felt intangible, unprovable against his narrative. "Your Honor," Grayson said, his voice rising, "Ms. Bennet's actions show a pattern of emotional manipulation. She's not the victim here. Mr. Carter is. He seeks custody to shield Emily from a mother who prioritizes control and greed over love." He sat, folding his hands, his eyes flicking to Sarah with a glint of victory. Ellison jotted a note, her face impassive, though her glance at Emily held a trace of warmth. "Ms. Harper, your response?" she asked. Lydia stood, her voice unsteady but determined. "Your Honor, these claims are baseless. Ms. Bennet has been Emily's primary caregiver, managing their home while Mr. Carter was absent for work and other pursuits." She hesitated, avoiding mention of the affair, lacking proof in court. "The affidavits are biased, from Mr. Carter's allies. We request a thorough review of their credibility and a home visit to confirm Ms. Bennet's dedication." Her words were logical but lacked the fire to match Grayson's theatrics, and Sarah's hope flickered. Sarah's hands shook, the tissue in her lap shredded. She wanted to scream that she'd given everything, her youth, her dreams for David and Emily, that his affair, his neglect, had broken their family. But the weight of his lies, the affidavits, the gallery's whispers, pinned her down. She looked at Emily, who offered a crayon smiley face, whispering, "For you, Mommy." The gesture was a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the helplessness, the fear that David's performance might sway the judge. Sarah had grown up in her parents' diner, serving farmers and truckers, her parents, Tom and Linda, working dawn to dusk to keep the place afloat. They were simple folk, their hands calloused from years of flipping burgers and balancing books, their love for Sarah fierce but practical. College wasn't in the cards. Sarah stayed to help, sketching logos for local shops in her spare time, her art a quiet rebellion against the town's sleepy rhythm. That day the bell above the door jingled, and Sarah glanced up, expecting another regular. Instead, a man in a crisp suit stepped in, his polished shoes out of place on the checkered floor. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like a summer storm, carrying a leather briefcase. Sarah's pulse skipped. She'd never seen anyone like him in Warseon. He scanned the diner, his gaze landing on her, and a slow smile curved his lips. "Is this the best coffee in town?" he asked, his voice smooth, a hint of a city drawl. Sarah grinned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Only if you like it strong enough to wake a tractor." She poured a mug, sliding it across the counter. "You're not from around here, are you?" "Guilty," he said, settling onto a stool. "David Carter, corporate lawyer. I'm in town for a deal. My firm's scouting land for a new distribution center." He sipped the coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. "And you're—" "Sarah Bennet," she said, leaning on the counter, her heart doing a little flip. "Diner royalty, born and bred." She nodded toward the kitchen, where her dad was flipping pancakes, the clatter of spatula on griddle a familiar song. David chuckled, a sound that warmed the room. "Royalty suits you." He pulled out a pen, doodling on a napkin, a skyline, jagged and bold. "I'm stuck here a few weeks. Tell me, Sarah Bennett, what's the best thing about Washin?" She tilted her head, caught by his intensity. "The sunsets," she said, thinking of the fields glowing gold. "And the people. They're real." She grabbed a napkin, sketching a cornstalk beside his skyline, her pencil quick and sure. "What's the best thing about your world?" He watched her draw, his smile deepening. "Right now?" This conversation. His fingers brushed hers as he took the napkin, and a spark shot through her, electric and wild. That night stretched into hours, the diner emptying as they talked. David told stories of Chicago's gleaming towers, his law firm's high-stakes deals, his life a world away from Waseon's dusty roads. Sarah shared her sketches, her dreams of designing something bigger than shop signs, her love for the town's quiet heart. He was 27, 5 years older, his confidence magnetic, his attention a drug. When he left, promising to return, Sarah's cheeks burned, her heart racing with a passion she'd only read about in novels. The next week was a blur. David came back every evening, trading his suit jacket for a loosened tie, his briefcase swapped for a coffee mug. They met outside work too, once at the county fair, where he won her a stuffed turtle at a ring toss, his laugh bright as the Ferris wheel lights. Another night, they drove to a field, lying on a blanket under a sunset that bled orange and pink. He kissed her there, his lips urgent, her hands tangling in his hair, the world shrinking to just them. It was a whirlwind, a romance Sarah couldn't believe was real. She, a small-town girl raised by parents who scrimped for every dime, had caught the eye of a man who seemed to hold the stars. David proposed 3 months later, on a crisp October night, outside the diner. He knelt on the sidewalk, a diamond ring glinting in its box, his eyes fierce with want. "Marry me, Sarah," he said. "Come with me to Chicago. We'll build a life. Big, bright, ours." Her parents watched from the diner window, Linda wiping tears, Tom nodding gruffly. Sarah's heart pounded, love and excitement drowning out the whispers of doubt. She barely knew David's world, his habits, his deeper dreams, but the passion between them felt like enough. She said yes, her laugh mingling with his, the ring heavy on her finger. After a small ceremony, they moved to Chicago, Sarah trading cornfields for skyscrapers, her art sidelined for David's climbing career. Sarah didn't see the cracks then, didn't notice David's need for control, his subtle jabs at her small-town roots. She was caught in the thrill, the newness, the belief that passion could carry them forever. But as she stood in that Chicago apartment, Emily's cries echoing, David's late nights at the firm growing longer, the first shadows crept in. Their marriage, built on a spark, hadn't been forged in the slow fire of compatibility. And years later, in a Toledo courtroom, that spark would burn out, leaving Sarah to fight for the one thing their love had made right. Emily. Emily's voice snapped her back. "Can we put sprinkles on it?" She held up a jar of rainbow sprinkles, her grin wide enough to show a missing front tooth. Sarah laughed, the sound brittle but real. "Sprinkles on pizza? You're wild, Em." She scooped Emily off the stool, spinning her until she squealed. For a moment the weight of tomorrow lifted, and it was just them, a team against the world. But when Sarah set her down, her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from David. "Need Emily's school records by Monday. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her jaw tightened. He wasn't asking for records, he was building his case piece by piece to rip Emily away. She tucked the phone in her pocket out of sight. "How about we draw while the pizza bakes?" she said, guiding Emily to the living room. The coffee table was littered with crayons and construction paper, Emily's latest obsession. Sarah sank onto the worn couch, watching Emily scribble a family of stick figures under a yellow sun. "Who's that one?" Sarah asked, pointing to a figure with long hair and a green dress. "That's Aunt Jenny," Emily said, adding a smile to the figure. "She's nice. She gave me a sketchbook once." Sarah's smile faltered. Jennifer Carter, David's sister, was a puzzle she couldn't solve. At family gatherings, Jennifer had been kind in her quiet way, slipping Emily extra cookies, complimenting Sarah's art. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling she was a spy for the Carters. After the divorce, Jennifer had tried to stay in touch, sending Emily birthday cards, even texting Sarah once to check in. Sarah had replied curtly, assuming Jennifer was fishing for dirt to feed David's case. Blood was thicker than water, and Jennifer was a Carter through and through. Still, Emily's affection for her Aunt Jenny stung, a reminder of couldn't trust. The oven timer dinged, and Sarah pulled out the pizza, its edges golden and the heart-shaped sauce bubbling. They sat cross-legged on the floor, eating straight from the pan, the fan's breeze ruffling Emily's drawings. Sarah savoured the moment, knowing tomorrow would be a battlefield. Lydia, her public defender, had warned her. David's lawyer was a shark, and the evidence, doctored photos of their cluttered apartment, old therapy records from Sarah's post-divorce anxiety, painted her as a mess. Lydia was trying, but her caseload was a mile long, and Sarah's hope felt like a candle flickering in a storm. "Mommy, are we going to court tomorrow?" Emily asked, her mouth full of cheese. Her question was innocent, but it hit Sarah like a punch. "Yeah, sweetie," Sarah said, brushing crumbs from Emily's chin. "It's just grown-up stuff. You don't need to worry." "But Daddy will be there," Emily said, her voice small. "He said I could live with him and have a big room." Sarah's throat tightened. She pictured David's sleek house, the kind with marble counters and no crayon marks on the walls. He'd been filling Emily's head with promises, dangling a life Sarah couldn't afford. "You like our home, don't you?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "We've got pizza nights and your art wall." Emily nodded, hugging her knees. "I like it here with you, Mommy. You're the best." Sarah pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "And you're my best girl. Always." But as Emily snuggled against her, Sarah's eyes drifted to the court papers on the counter, the words custody hearing bold and black. David's wealth, his connections, his lies, they loomed like a tidal wave. She thought of Jennifer again, her quiet presence at the edge of every family memory. Was she in on David's plan? The thought made Sarah's chest tighten, but she pushed it down. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not when Emily's future was at stake. Alone in the kitchen, Sarah sank into a chair, the fan's hum her only company. Tomorrow she'd face David, his lawyer, and maybe even Jennifer's watchful eyes. Sarah Bennett adjusted the collar of her thrift store blazer, the fabric stiff against her clammy skin. The Toledo family courtroom smelled of stale coffee and polished wood, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of bees. She sat rigid at the defendant's table, her heart hammering as Emily doodled in a sketchbook beside her, oblivious to the stakes. Across the aisle, David leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit and smug grin screaming confidence. "We'll push back hard," Lydia whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Sarah nodded, clutching the edge of the table. Her freelance gigs and barista shifts barely kept the lights on. How could she compete with David's corporate lawyer money? The judge's gavel cracked, and Sarah's stomach lurched. Judge Margaret Ellison, a woman with steel-grey hair and a no-nonsense stare, peered over her glasses. "We're here to determine custody of Emily Carter," she announced, her voice cutting through the room's hum. "Mr. Carter, your counsel may proceed." Grayson stood. "Your Honor, my client seeks full custody to ensure Emily's well-being. Ms. Bennett is unfit, financially unstable and emotionally volatile." He slid a stack of photos across the table, each one a dagger to Sarah's chest. The images showed her apartment in chaos. Boxes strewn about, dishes piled in the sink. They were taken right after the divorce, when she and Emily were scrambling to settle. Grayson hadn't mentioned that part. "These depict Ms. Bennett's living conditions," Grayson continued, his tone dripping with pity. "Hardly suitable for a child. And then there's her mental health." He produced a file, waving it like a flag. "Medical records from 3 years ago show Ms. Bennett sought treatment for severe anxiety. She was prescribed medication. Can we trust Emily's safety with someone so unstable? Sarah's face burned. Those records were from the months after she left David, when his gaslighting and control had left her unraveling. She'd pulled herself together for Emily, but Grayson twisted it into a portrait of a broken woman. She glanced at Lydia, expecting a fight, but Lydia fumbled with her notes, muttering, "We'll address this, Your Honour." Her hesitation stung worse than the accusations. Sarah stole a look at Emily, who was colouring a butterfly, her tongue poking out in concentration. The sight gave her a flicker of strength. "It's not true," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to draw eyes. "Those photos are old. I was moving. And I'm fine now. I've been fine for years. I love my daughter." Grayson smirked. "Love doesn't pay for school supplies, Ms. Bennett, or medical care. Mr. Carter can provide Emily with a stable home, private tutors, a future." He gestured to David, who nodded solemnly, playing the concerned father. Sarah wanted to scream. David had barely called Emily after the divorce, too busy with his corner office and new girlfriend. Now he was the hero. Judge Ellison jotted a note, her face unreadable, though her eyes flicked to Emily with a hint of softness. "Ms. Harper, your response?" she asked. Lydia cleared her throat, standing. "Your Honour, Sarah, Ms. Bennett, works tirelessly. She's a dedicated mother. Those records are outdated, and the photos lack context. We request a home visit to show Emily's current environment." It was a decent point, but Lydia's delivery was flat, drowned out by Grayson's polish. Sarah's hope sank like a stone in the Mormie River. "Your Honour," Grayson said, snapping Sarah back, "Mr. Carter only wants what's best for his daughter. Ms. Bennett's circumstances, unsteady income, a cramped apartment, can't compare to the life he can offer." He sat, folding his hands as if he'd already won. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "I'm her mother," she said, louder now, ignoring Lydia's warning nudge. "I've raised her, loved her, every single day. David didn't even show up for her last birthday. He doesn't know her favourite colour or her bedtime story." Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. "Emily's happy with me." Judge Ellison raised an eyebrow, scribbling another note. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Please refrain from outbursts." Her tone was firm, but her glance at Emily, who was now drawing a flower, held a trace of warmth. "We'll recess for today. I expect both sides to prepare for a social services evaluation. Adjourned." The gavel fell, and the room exhaled. David stood, murmuring to Grayson, his eyes sliding over Sarah like she was invisible. She gathered Emily's sketchbook, her fingers shaking. "Come on, sweetie," she said, lifting Emily into her arms. Emily hugged her neck, her crayons clattering to the floor. As they headed for the exit, Sarah caught Jennifer watching from the gallery, her expression unreadable. Their eyes locked for a moment, and Sarah's chest tightened. Jennifer had always been quiet. At family gatherings, she would slip Emily extra sweets or nod at Sarah's small talk. But Sarah knew she was part of the Carter family, and she couldn't trust her now. But the memories surged, sharp and bitter. 4 years ago, at a Carter family Christmas, Sarah had overheard David's mother praising him for a big case win, while Jennifer stood in the corner, clutching a glass of wine. Sarah had caught her eye, expecting a smile, but Jennifer looked away, her face tight. Later, Jennifer had given Emily a hand-knit scarf, her fingers brushing Sarah's as she handed it over. "For cold Ohio winters," she'd said softly. Sarah had mumbled thanks, assuming it was a ploy to win Emily's favour. Now, seeing Jennifer in court, her presence felt ambiguous. Jennifer Carter sat alone in her Toledo apartment, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. The living room was sparse, a second-hand couch, a coffee table cluttered with art supplies, and a single lamp casting a warm glow over her sketch pad. Her fingers traced the outline of a half-finished drawing, a meadow of wildflowers she'd never seen in person. At 36, Jennifer lived in the margins of her own life, a shadow cast by her brother David's blinding spotlight. Tonight, though, her mind wasn't on flowers. It was on Sarah, Emily, and something she'd found in David's computer. She leaned back, closing her eyes, and the past rushed in like a cold Ohio wind. 25 years ago, in the Carter family's sprawling suburban home, Jennifer had sat at the dining table, her math homework ignored. Her parents fawned over David's latest soccer trophy, his grin wide as he recounted the winning goal. "That's our star," her mother had said, ruffling his hair. Jennifer, 10 and awkward with braces and a too-big sweater, had pushed her peas around her plate. When she'd shown her father a sketch of their dog, he'd glanced at it and said, "Nice, Jenny, but let's hear about David's game." The memory stung, not because she hated David, but because her parents had raised him to believe he could have anything, anyone, he wanted. Jennifer had grown up invisible, dreaming of a little sister to share secrets with, someone who'd see her. The dream had flickered to life when David married Sarah. Jennifer had watched her at the wedding, radiant in a simple white dress, laughing as she danced with Emily's grandfather. Sarah was warm, creative, everything Jennifer longed to be close to. At the reception, Jennifer had almost worked up the courage to say so, to tell Sarah she'd always wanted a sister. But her shyness won, and she'd stayed on the sidelines, sketching napkins into tiny flowers instead. Over the years, she'd tried to connect, bringing Emily crayons, complimenting Sarah's freelance designs, but Sarah's guarded smiles kept her at arm's length. After the divorce, Sarah's wariness hardened, and Jennifer understood why. She was a Carter, tainted by David's name. Jennifer opened her laptop, the screen's blue light harsh against the dim room. Her heart thudded as she logged into David's email, using the password he'd had since high school. StarPlayer88. He'd never bothered to change it, his arrogance a gift she hadn't expected. She'd started snooping after overhearing him on a call last month, his voice low and smug. "Grayson's got the photos, she won't stand a chance." The words had chilled her, and curiosity turned to dread when she found the email to his lawyer, sent 2 weeks ago. The subject line was innocuous, case prep, but the contents were a gut punch. "Grayson, the photos from Sarah's old place are perfect. Push the narrative. She's a mess. Can't handle Emily. I've got a guy who'll swear she missed rent payments. And those therapy records? Gold. Make her look unhinged. We'll wrap this up fast." David's signature sat at the bottom, bold and unapologetic. Jennifer's hands shook as she read it again, the words searing into her. Her brother wasn't just fighting for Emily, he was orchestrating a lie to destroy Sarah. She printed the email, the printer's whir loud in the quiet apartment. The paper felt heavy, like a confession. She tucked it into a clear plastic sleeve, then copied the email thread onto a flash drive, her fingers clumsy with nerves. This was proof that could save Sarah and Emily. But it came at a cost. Her parents, still dazzled by David's charm, would never forgive her. She could already hear her mother's voice, sharp and accusing. "You turned on your own blood, Jennifer." The thought made her chest ache. Jennifer stood pacing to the window. Outside, Toledo's streetlights flickered, casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalk. She remembered the last time she'd seen Sarah, a week ago at a family barbecue David had hosted to show stability for the court. Sarah had been there to drop off Emily, her posture stiff as she handed over a backpack. Jennifer had caught her eye, offering a small wave, but Sarah's lips had pressed into a thin line, her gaze darting to David. Jennifer had wanted to say, "I'm not like him. I'm on your side." But the words stuck, as always, and Sarah had driven away, leaving Jennifer with a hollow ache. The barbecue had been a performance, David grilling steaks, charming the neighbours, Emily perched on his knee like a prop. But Jennifer had seen the truth in Emily's eyes, the way she glanced at the gate, waiting for Sarah. Later, when Emily showed Jennifer a drawing of a butterfly, Jennifer had knelt beside her. "You're so talented, Em," she'd said, her voice soft. Emily had beamed, hugging her. "You're my favourite aunt." The words had warmed Jennifer, but they also sharpened her resolve. Emily didn't belong in David's sterile world, where love was a transaction. She sat back at the table staring at the plastic sleeve and flash drive. Tomorrow she'd go to court again, sitting in the back where Sarah wouldn't notice. She'd wanted to give Sarah the evidence directly, to explain everything, but Sarah's distrust was a wall she couldn't climb. Jennifer didn't blame her. David's lies had poisoned too much. Still, she couldn't let him win. If she couldn't be Sarah's sister, she could at least be her ally. Sarah pushed her cart through the fluorescent-lit aisles of the Toledo grocery store, the wheels squeaking against the scuffed linoleum. Her list was short: milk, bread, peanut butter, staples to stretch her paycheck until the next freelance gig. Emily skipped beside her, clutching a crumpled dollar bill she'd found under the couch, her eyes fixed on the candy aisle. The air smelled of overripe bananas and cleaning solution, a Saturday morning hum that felt deceptively normal. Sarah's mind, though, was still in the courtroom, replaying David's lawyer's smug accusations and Jennifer's unreadable stare from the gallery. The custody battle was a weight she carried everywhere, even here, among the cereal boxes. "Mommy, can I get gummy worms?" Emily asked, her pigtails bouncing as she pointed to a bright package. Her smile, wide and gap-toothed, was a fleeting anchor in Sarah's storm. Sarah forced a grin, checking the price tag. "Maybe next time, Em. Let's stick to the list, okay?" She hated saying no, hated how David's voice echoed in her head, claiming she couldn't provide for their daughter. Emily nodded, unfazed, and started humming a tune from school, her dollar bill now tucked into her pocket. As they rounded the corner to the dairy section, Sarah froze. Jennifer stood by the milk cooler, a basket dangling from her arm. Her dark hair was loose, framing a face that looked softer than in court, but Sarah's pulse spiked all the same. Sarah's grip tightened on the cart, her instincts screaming to steer clear. But Emily's face lit up. "Aunt Jenny!" Emily squealed, darting forward before Sarah could stop her. She threw her arms around Jennifer's legs, nearly knocking over her basket. "I missed you!" Jennifer's eyes widened, then softened as she knelt to Emily's level, a hesitant smile breaking through. "Hey, sweetie," she said, her voice quiet but warm. "I missed you too." She glanced at Sarah, her expression faltering as if bracing for a blow. Sarah's jaw clenched. She wanted to snatch Emily back, to shield her from whatever game Jennifer was playing. Was she here by chance, or had David sent her to spy, to twist this innocent moment into more evidence of Sarah's failings? "Emily, come here," Sarah said, her tone sharper than intended. Emily pouted but obeyed, dragging her sneakers back to the cart. Sarah faced Jennifer, her voice low. "What are you doing here?" Jennifer stood, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her basket held a lone yogurt and a loaf of bread, hardly the haul of a schemer. "Just shopping," she said, her eyes meeting Sarah's briefly before dropping to the floor. "I didn't expect to see you." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't buy it. Toledo wasn't that small, and Jennifer's timing felt too convenient after her courtroom appearance. "Right," Sarah said, her voice clipped. "Well, we're busy." She nudged the cart forward, but Emily tugged her hand. "Mommy, Aunt Jenny's nice," Emily whispered, loud enough for Jennifer to hear. "She gave me paints, remember?" Jennifer's face lit up for a moment, then dimmed as she caught Sarah's glare. "Emily, you still use those paints?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hopeful. "You're so good at drawing." "Yeah," Emily beamed. She reached into Sarah's purse, fishing out a crumpled drawing from yesterday's court session. Sarah's patience snapped. "Emily, enough." She softened her tone, kneeling to her daughter's level. "We need to finish shopping, okay?" Emily nodded, confused, and Sarah stood, facing Jennifer again. "Look, I don't know what you're up to, but leave us alone. We've got enough to deal with." Jennifer's shoulders sagged, her fingers tightening around her basket. Pain flashed in her eyes, so raw it caught Sarah off guard. I just wanted to say hi," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I care about Emily. And you." Sarah's chest tightened. The words sounded genuine, but she couldn't trust them. Jennifer was David's sister, raised in the same world of privilege and manipulation. "Save it," Sarah said, turning the cart. "Come on, Em." As they moved toward the checkout, Sarah glanced back. Jennifer stood frozen by the milk cooler, her face pale, her basket dangling like an afterthought. For a split second, Sarah wondered if she'd misjudged her, but the thought dissolved under the weight of David's lies. Jennifer was probably reporting back to him already, twisting this encounter into another strike against her. At the register, Emily clutched her dollar bill, her earlier joy dimmed. "Is Aunt Jenny mad at us?" she asked, her voice small. Sarah's heart ached. She smoothed Emily's pigtails, forcing a smile. "No, sweetie, she's just busy. Like us." She paid for their groceries, the cashier's chatter about a summer sale fading into noise. As they stepped into the parking lot, the Ohio sun beat down, glinting off cars and making Sarah squint. She loaded the bags into their beat-up sedan, Emily buckling herself into the back seat. The drive home was quiet, Emily humming softly as she traced shapes on the window. Sarah's mind churned. Jennifer's hurt expression lingered, nagging at her. What if she wasn't like David? What if she'd meant what she said? The next day, Sarah Bennett sat at the defendant's table in the courtroom, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles ached. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and tension, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a distant storm. Emily sat beside her, swinging her legs and colouring a unicorn in her sketchbook, her crayons a bright defiance against the room's grey weight. Across the aisle, David Carter adjusted his tie, his face a mask of calm superiority. Today's custody hearing felt like a guillotine, and Sarah's neck was on the block. Judge Margaret Ellison's gavel fell, sharp and final. "Let's proceed," she said, her voice steady as she scanned the room over her glasses. "Mr. Grayson, your evidence?" David's lawyer stood, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. "Your Honour, we have new concerns about Ms. Bennett's ability to care for Emily." He held up a medical report, his lips curling slightly. "Last year, Emily visited the ER for a fever. Ms. Bennett delayed seeking treatment, endangering her daughter's health. This negligence, combined with her financial instability, proves she's unfit." Sarah's stomach twisted. The ER visit had been a nightmare. At midnight, Sarah's car barely starting, her bank account too thin for a cab. She'd gotten Emily to the hospital, stayed by her side, but Grayson spun it into a tale of reckless parenting. She glanced at Lydia, hoping for a spark of fight. Lydia scribbled notes, her face drawn, but her silence screamed defeat. "That's not fair," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. Lydia touched her arm, a warning to stay quiet, but Sarah's fear was a wildfire. Grayson continued, his voice smooth as oil. "Ms. Bennett relies on food stamps in a crumbling apartment. Emily deserves better." He slid the report to the judge, his eyes flicking to Sarah with a glint of triumph. "Your Honour, the evidence is clear. Ms. Bennett's unstable finances and history of mental health issues make her unfit to raise Emily. Mr. Carter offers a secure home, top schools, and a future Emily deserves. Ms. Bennett's love isn't enough. Emily needs stability, not struggle." The courtroom doors creaked, signalling a break. Ellison stood. "We'll recess for 15 minutes. I expect final remarks afterward." Sarah exhaled, gathering Emily's sketchbook as the room emptied. She led Emily to a bench in the hall, the courthouse's vending machine humming nearby. "Stay here, sweetie," Sarah said, kissing her forehead. "I need to talk to Lydia." Emily nodded, pulling out her crayons, her tongue poking out as she drew. Jennifer slipped into the hallway, her scarf loose, her heart racing. She'd been in the gallery earlier, hidden in the crowd, watching Sarah's face crumple under Grayson's attack. Sarah's rejection at the grocery store still burned, but Jennifer's resolve held. She clutched the clear plastic sleeve and flash drive in her coat pocket. She spotted Emily on the bench drawing a butterfly with a green scarf. "Hey, Em," she said, kneeling, her voice trembling but warm. Emily's face lit up. "Aunt Jenny!" She threw her arms around Jennifer, nearly toppling her. She held up the drawing, her grin wide. Jennifer's eyes stung, her smile shaky. "It's beautiful, sweetie. You're so good at this." She glanced around. "I came to see you," she said, her heart pounding. "I've got something for your mommy. It's really important." Emily tilted her head, curious. "Like a present?" "Kind of," Jennifer said, pulling the sleeve and flash drive from her pocket. The email gleamed through the plastic. "Can you give this to her after the break?" She placed them in Emily's small hands, her fingers brushing the child's warmth. Emily nodded, clutching the items. "Okay, Aunt Jenny. I'll give it to Mommy." She hugged Jennifer again, her joy a balm to Jennifer's fear. "You're my favorite aunt." Jennifer's throat tightened. "You're my favorite too, Em." She stood, her eyes scanning the hall. Sarah's voice drifted from around the corner, talking to Lydia. Jennifer backed away, her scarf slipping as she melted into the crowd. Back on the bench, Emily tucked the sleeve and flash drive into her backpack, her crayons spilling as she resumed drawing. The courthouse clock ticked, the break nearly over. Sarah returned, her face pale but set. "Ready, Em?" she asked, lifting her daughter's bag. "Yup," Emily said, her butterfly complete. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears as she sat at the defendant's table. Across the aisle, David leaned toward his lawyer, his jaw tight, his eyes glinting with the certainty of victory. The custody hearing had reached its climax, and Sarah felt like a boxer in the final round, bruised and swaying with no strength left to swing. Sarah's chest constricted, her breath shallow. Grayson's words were a noose, tightening with every syllable. Sarah opened her mouth, but fear choked her. She wanted to scream that David didn't know Emily's favorite song, that he'd never wiped her tears after a bad dream. But her voice failed, and she shook her head, defeated. At that moment, Emily tugged Sarah's sleeve, her small hand warm. "Mommy, I got something," she whispered, her eyes wide and earnest. She reached into her backpack, pulling out a clear plastic sleeve and a flash drive, their edges smudged with crayon. "Aunt Jenny gave me this. She said, 'Give it to you now.'" Emily thrust them into Sarah's hands, her smile bright but confused. Sarah froze, her breath catching. "Jennifer?" The sleeve held a printed email, David's name glaring at the top. Her eyes skimmed the words. Bribe the landlord, make her look crazy, and her heart lurched. She passed the items to Lydia, whose tired face snapped alert, her eyes flashing with sudden fire. "Your Honor," Lydia said, standing, her voice steady for the first time. "We have new evidence, provided by Ms. Bennett's sister-in-law, Jennifer Carter. This email, from Mr. Carter to his counsel, details a plan to fabricate evidence against Ms. Bennett." The courtroom stilled, a collective inhale. Grayson's smirk faltered, and David's face paled, his hand gripping the table. "What is this?" he snapped, his voice sharp but unsteady. He turned to the gallery as if searching for Jennifer, but she was hidden in the back row, her scarf low, her breath held. Ellison took the sleeve, her eyes narrowing as she read. The flash drive sat on the table, a silent witness. "Ms. Harper, explain," she said, her tone icy. Lydia held up the email, her voice clear. "This correspondence, authenticated by Mr. Carter's email account, outlines his intent to bribe witnesses and manipulate medical records to discredit Ms. Bennett. It's a deliberate attempt to mislead this court." She handed the flash drive to the clerk. "The full thread is here, Your Honor." Sarah's mind reeled. Jennifer had done this. The woman she'd pushed away, accused of betrayal, had risked everything. She thought of the grocery store, Jennifer's hurt eyes, and shame flooded her. Emily patted her hand, whispering, "Aunt Jenny said it's important." Sarah squeezed her daughter's fingers, her eyes stinging. Grayson leapt up. "This is outrageous! The evidence is unverified, possibly forged. We demand an investigation into its source." His voice cracked, betraying panic. David turned to Sarah, his eyes blazing. "You got to Jennifer, didn't you? My own sister." His words were a hiss, loud enough for the gallery to murmur. Sarah shook her head, stunned, her voice lost. Ellison raised a hand, silencing the room. "Mr. Carter, control yourself." She studied the email, her face unreadable, then looked at Sarah. "Ms. Bennett, how did you obtain this?" Sarah swallowed, her voice trembling but firm. "My daughter Emily gave it to me. She said Jennifer Carter handed it to her during the break." She met Ellison's gaze, her heart pounding. "I didn't know. I didn't ask her to do this." Ellison's eyes flicked to Emily, who was colouring again, unaware of the earthquake she'd triggered. A faint warmth crossed the judge's face, then vanished. "This is a serious allegation," she said, her voice steel. "I'm ordering a prosecutorial review of this evidence. The court will verify its authenticity and investigate Mr. Carter's actions. This hearing is suspended until results are obtained." She banged the gavel, and the room erupted in whispers. David slumped, his hands covering his face, while Grayson whispered urgently, his composure shattered. Lydia turned to Sarah, a rare smile breaking through. "This changes everything," she said, squeezing Sarah's arm. Sarah nodded, dazed, her eyes on Emily, who was adding stars to her rainbow. In the back row, Jennifer exhaled, her scarf slipping as tears pricked her eyes. She'd seen David's shock, felt the weight of her family's coming wrath. She slipped out before Sarah could spot her, the courthouse's vending machine hum fading as she stepped out. A week later, Judge Ellison entered the courtroom, her robes rustling, and the room stood. "Be seated," she said, her voice firm as she settled behind the bench. "We've reviewed the prosecutorial findings regarding Mr. Carter's actions. I'll now deliver the court's decision." Her eyes swept the room, lingering on Emily with a flicker of warmth before hardening on David. "The investigation," Ellison began, "confirmed the authenticity of the email provided by Jennifer Carter. It detailed Mr. Carter's intent to bribe witnesses and falsify evidence against Ms. Bennett, including manipulated photos and medical records." Her tone was steel, her gaze pinning David. "Such actions undermine the integrity of this court and endanger the child's welfare." Ellison continued, "Ms. Bennett has demonstrated unwavering commitment to her daughter, despite financial hardship. Social services reported a loving, stable home, corroborated by Emily's own statements." She paused, her voice softening. "Emily's well-being is this court's priority. Therefore, I grant full custody to Sarah Bennett. Mr. Carter's parental rights are restricted to supervised visits, pending further review. Criminal charges for perjury and evidence tampering are under consideration." The words hit Sarah like a wave, relief crashing over her. She exhaled, tears pricking her eyes as she pulled Emily into a hug, burying her face in her daughter's pigtails. "We did it, Em," she whispered, her voice trembling. Emily giggled, hugging back, her crayons tumbling to the floor. David sat frozen, his jaw tight, his eyes staring ahead as Grayson muttered about appeals. The gallery murmured, a low hum of shock and approval. Ellison's gavel fell and the room stirred. Lydia turned to Sarah, a genuine smile breaking through. "You're free, Sarah. You and Emily." Sarah nodded, clutching Emily's hand, her heart full but heavy with a new weight. Jennifer's sacrifice. She'd betrayed her brother, her family for them. Why hadn't she come today? As they left the courtroom, the hallway's vending machine hummed. A familiar drone. Sarah knelt to zip Emily's coat, her mind churning. "Em, tell me again about Aunt Jenny giving you that bag," she said, her voice gentle. Emily's eyes lit up. "She found me drawing. She said it was for you, Mommy, and it was super important. Then she hugged me." Emily mimed a big squeeze, her mittens flapping. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd pushed Jennifer away, called her a liar, and yet Jennifer had risked everything. Outside, the frost crunched under their boots as they walked to the car. Sarah buckled Emily in, her sketchbook open to the turtle, a green heart on its shell. "Did Aunt Jenny say anything else?" Sarah asked, starting the engine. Emily shook her head. "She just looked kind of sad, but she smiled when I showed her my butterfly." Sarah nodded, her chest aching. She drove home, Toledo's grey skyline blurring through her tears. At their apartment, she cooked Emily's favourite mac and cheese, the routine grounding her. But Jennifer's absence lingered, a question she couldn't shake. A few days later, Sarah called a mutual friend, Claire, who'd known the Carters for years. "Have you seen Jennifer?" Sarah asked, her voice low as Emily watched cartoons. Claire sighed. "She's gone, Sarah. Her parents cut her off after the email thing. They're furious. Say she betrayed David. I heard she moved to Mexico, some small town. She didn't leave a number." Sarah's heart sank. Mexico? She pictured Jennifer's quiet face, her hurt eyes in the grocery store. "Do you know where exactly?" she pressed, grabbing a pen. "Somewhere near Puerto Vallarta, I think. I'll ask around," Claire said. "She did the right thing, you know, for you and Emily." "I know," Sarah whispered, hanging up. She sat at the kitchen table, Emily's turtle drawing beside her. Jennifer had lost her family to save theirs, and Sarah had pushed her away. The guilt was a stone in her chest, but so was a spark of resolve. She'd find Jennifer, thank her, apologize. She owed her that much. Sarah held Emily's hand tightly as they stepped off the bus in Puerto Vallarta, the Mexican sun blazing down, turning the air thick with heat and the scent of salt. Palm trees swayed, and market stalls burst with colour, a world away from Toledo's grey frost. Emily, now 7, clutched her sketchbook, her eyes wide at the vibrant chaos, crayons rattling in her bag. It was February 2026, 3 months since Sarah won custody, and today they were here to find Jennifer, the woman who'd risked everything to save them. Sarah's heart pounded, a mix of nerves and hope, her backpack heavy with the weight of words she needed to say. They found the cafe Claire had described, a pastel shack by the beach, its tables spilling onto the sand. Through the window, Sarah saw Jennifer, her dark hair loose, paint smudging her fingers as she sketched at a corner table. She looked lighter, but a shadow of loneliness lingered in her eyes. Sarah's throat tightened. "Ready, Em?" she asked, her voice catching. "Yup! Aunt Jenny's gonna love my turtle," Emily chirped, waving a drawing of a sea turtle with a heart on its shell. Sarah managed a shaky smile and led her inside, the door's chime cutting through the salsa music. Jennifer's head snapped up, her sketchpad slipping. Her eyes widened, darting from Sarah to Emily, then back. "Sarah? Emily?" she whispered, her voice raw, like she was seeing ghosts. Emily broke free, barreling into Jennifer's arms. "Aunt Jenny, I missed you so much. Look at my turtle." She shoved the drawing forward, bouncing on her toes, her grin brighter than the sun outside. Jennifer's face crumpled into a smile, tears glinting as she hugged Emily tight. "Oh, sweetie, it's amazing," she said, her voice thick, stroking Emily's pigtails. She looked at Sarah, her eyes wary but soft, like she was waiting for a door to slam shut. Sarah stepped closer, her fingers twisting the frayed strap of her backpack. "Jen," she started, her voice breaking, "I messed up. I'm so sorry." The words tumbled out, heavy with years of regret. "I didn't trust you. I thought you were on David's side and I pushed you away. Gobble, and I'm here to say thank you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, her chest aching with the weight of it. "I don't deserve what you did." Jennifer's breath hitched, her eyes shimmering. She set Emily's drawing down, standing slowly, her hands fidgeting like she wasn't sure where to put them. "Sarah, you don't have to say sorry," she said, her voice soft but trembling, each word careful. "I got why you didn't trust me. He's a lot, always has been. But I couldn't let him hurt you, or Em. I just wanted you both to be okay." She swallowed, her gaze locking with Sarah's, raw and open. "I'd do it again, every time." Sarah's sob broke free and she closed the gap, pulling Jennifer into a hug, her arms fierce around her. "You're too good, Jen," she choked out, her face buried in Jennifer's shoulder, the scent of paint and sea salt grounding her. Jennifer tensed, then melted into the embrace, her own tears falling as she hugged back, a quiet whimper escaping. Emily squealed, worming between them, her small hands grabbing theirs. Big hug, she giggled, and their laughter spilled out, shaky and real, blending with the cafe's music. They sank into chairs at the table, the ocean's murmur a soft backdrop. Over iced hibiscus tea, Jennifer talked about her life here, teaching kids to paint murals, sketching sunsets over the waves, carving out peace after her family's rejection. Her voice was quiet but alive, her hands moving like she was painting the words. Sarah shared their Toledo days, Emily's school play, pizza nights, the custody win that still felt like a miracle. Emily flipped through her sketchbook, chattering about turtles and stars, her enthusiasm pulling smiles from Jennifer's once-guarded face. Sarah watched, her heart swelling, seeing the sister she'd missed all those years. The memory flickered, tender and sharp. At her wedding to David, Jennifer had lingered by the dessert table, her fingers folding napkins into delicate flowers, her eyes tracing Sarah's laughter across the room. Sarah had met her gaze feeling a spark, a chance for something more, but she'd turned away, wary of the Carter name. Now, across this sunlit table, she wished she'd reached out, seen the sister Jennifer had always wanted to be. As the sun dipped, painting the sky pink, Sarah grabbed Jennifer's hand, her grip firm. "Jen, you're my family now," she said, her voice thick but steady. "Not just because of David. You're my sister, for real. Come visit us, or we'll keep dragging ourselves here. You're stuck with us." Her eyes burned, but she smiled, meaning every word. Emily nodded, bouncing in her seat. "Yeah, Aunt Jenny. You gotta see my turtle pillow and my glitter crayons." Jennifer's laugh was soft, her eyes glistening like the sea. "I'd love that," she said, squeezing Sarah's hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always wanted, a sister." Her smile was radiant, a dream finally touched. They strolled along the beach, Emily darting after waves, her giggles a melody. Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known in years, the past's weight lifting with each step beside Jennifer. Back in Toledo, spring unfurled, marigolds blooming in their backyard. Life settled, school runs, freelance gigs, Emily's drawings taped to the fridge. But in April, a doctor's visit shattered the calm. Sarah's exhaustion wasn't just stress, it was liver failure, urgent, demanding a transplant. Fear for Emily surged, her calls to friends and family yielding no matches, the odds grim. Claire reached Jennifer, now back in Mexico. Without a second thought, Jennifer flew to Ohio, her quiet strength unshaken. Tests confirmed her as a match and she donated, saving Sarah's life. In the hospital, Sarah woke to Jennifer sketching by her bed, a flower taking shape. "Told you you're stuck with me," Jennifer said, her grin teasing, her eyes warm. Weeks later, in their backyard, Sarah, still weak but healing, stood with Emily and Jennifer. They planted a marigold, its gold petals a promise. Emily drew them, 3 figures, hands linked, turtles at their feet. A medical bill sat on the kitchen table, a shadow of future struggles, but with Jennifer's hand in hers, it felt bearable. "You saved me twice," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I'll never be able to thank you enough." Jennifer shook her head, tucking hair behind her ear. "You don't owe me, Sarah. This is what we do. Sisters, you know." Emily hugged them, crayons scattered in the grass. As Toledo's sunset glowed, Sarah felt a harmony forged through pain and love, a family not born but chosen, strong enough for